Welcome, everybody, to Next Gen Leadership. I'm your host, Jimmy Ryan, and today we welcome Gino Ferrante and Sasha Stair. Say what's up.
What's happening, people?
All right, so today we're talking about communication breakdown. So we just had an example of this. All of us running late. Actually, no, that's not true. Gino was running late. I was running late. And we had a little bit of a communication breakdown. And I think that this is relevant to loan officers that are always doing 10,000 things at once. And we tend to overpromise and we tend to say we're going to be at a certain place at a certain time. But then that call goes a little bit longer. That meeting goes a little bit longer. And then all of a sudden we're not fulfilling the promises that we said that we were going to do. And it's a lack of integrity. It's a lack of follow through. And this is something that we all deal with on a daily basis, I would say, in all sorts of different verticals, not just mortgage, but particularly with loan officers. So I want to open us up with talking about how our communication breakdown happened today, and in what we're doing now. We're rolling with it. We're leaders. We're making it happen, and with no sweat, But I feel like some people really can't handle that and deal with it.
It depends on the importance of the meeting, and I'm not saying this isn't important, but we did learn, Don and I, through the years when we had our AM radio talk show. You're on at 10 a.m. and there can't be blank airtime for an hour. That can't happen on AM radio. So I can tell you that because it was a non-negotiable, we never missed it. In 10 years, we never missed it. Either we were on or we planned for somebody to be on our behalf, but we never missed it. And you can't have 1 minute of dead airtime. So right. I can tell you that when something's a non-negotiable, when something's important to you, you shouldn't have a communications breakdown. It should be part of your plan. Now, what happens in what you're alluding to is most real estate agents and loan officers, but mostly real estate agents, have zero discipline. Not even one dot of it. It's zero. And what happens is their lack of discipline translates to us because lack of planning on their part becomes an emergency on ours. And that's exactly what happened just now. Lack of planning on my part became an emergency for all you guys because I had a 9:30 call. It was supposed to go 9:30 to 10:30. That person texted me at 9:35 that they needed 10 more minutes. Then when they text me, I was on the line and I had to call them back. And then so we started 30 minutes late and that had to push this back. And I knew that was happening. So I emailed Jimmy. I said, Jimmy, I need to push back 30 minutes. I forgot Sasha was going to be on with us. So she's like, Bueller, where are you guys?
I literally sent an email and I was like, speaking of communication breakdown, I'm like, I'm on. Where are you guys?
Yeah. And how does that feel? Let's talk about that for a second. How does that feel to be the person that got stood up for a meeting? Because that's how our clients feel when we don't respond to them. We set an expectation and we fail. Yeah. So how did that feel for you?
It's a good question because I think it's an opportunity to talk about learning in real life. So like one, PTSD of like not being asked to dance at middle school dances for sure. So thanks a lot, guys. But also
all that trauma just bubbled right back up.
Right. So I'm up against a wall and I'm feeling like I chose the wrong dress and I did my hair wrong, but thanks. No, but truthfully, I do think when I was, and I know you're gonna laugh, but like when I was younger in my career, I would take things very personal and I still take things personal, but I took them way more personal. So 25-year-old me probably would have been like, oh my God, they rescheduled, they didn't want me on, I'm not important, I don't matter, right? What you name it, because our insecurities come out when something like that happens and we do get triggered. 41-year-old me knows better than to take things too personal. And though it did sting a little, because I'm like, well, what you don't know what's going on. And you're like, oh my God, what did I miss it? Did I screw something up? I also know to go, okay, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to say, hey guys, did I miss something? And I did. I called, I texted, I emailed. I did my best to communicate. No response right then and there because you both were on other calls and I didn't know. And then it was like, let it go and say, I'm either going to get a phone call back at some point and you're going to let me know what happened. And it's going to be hey, you missed the memo and you were late to the wrong thing, or, oh, hey, we were late, which it was, and no big deal. And you move on. But yeah, it does. I think most people have a human emotional response. Whether we can maturely manage through it or not is another question. But we're going to have that response of like, I just got stood up. That sucks. And it's not a good feeling. And so, though I'm not putting that back on both of you, when I think about a customer, yeah, that's the last thing you want them to feel. You want them to feel like they're the most important, the highest priority all the time. And even one small slip like this, especially if they're having a bad day and they're not able to handle it emotionally well, could screw up a deal, right?
Okay, so let's talk about that real quick. And Jimmy, then I'll let you ask a question. But at Todd Duncan's High Trust Sales Academy, he said something that really rang with me and it stuck with me to this day. It's been like 8 months and it just like keeps ringing in my ears. It says, your conversion ratio is your trust score. And so what happens when you do things without integrity, when you set expectations and don't meet them, is you're eroding trust. And if you're eroding trust, you're destroying your conversion ratio. So if you wonder why you don't have good conversion, start to ask yourself, do I do what I say I'm going to do?
Wow. And look, it comes down to integrity. I think that I think you're onto something with real estate agents do it, and that transcends to loan officers doing it. And it's because we try to do more than we actually can, and we try to cram our schedule and have almost no room for deviation. And I think it's part of it. I think you have to do that. I think that managing a calendar and managing your time is, it's crucial. And you have to jam things in, and sometimes it doesn't work out. So I feel like it doesn't matter, though. I feel like it really doesn't. I feel like you said you're going to do something and you didn't do it. And that's where the lack of integrity comes from. And that's where we get bad raps. Loan officers are looked at like that. So are real estate agents. They said one thing, but they did another. They said they would call me, but they didn't. I had to call them. And so what's the answer? And you guys both know people that are like this. Do you know the type of people that are like super disciplined on their calendar? Like, hey, we had a time, we're ending, this is the end time, and then cancels everything else after that. Sorry, but we have to do this at another time. I'm bad at that. I'm terrible at that. I'll rock it.
I've gotten better at that. And so it has to come from a place of your calendar has to be how you operate. So my to-do list is my calendar. It's not a to-do list. I put things that I want to accomplish on my calendar because let's say, for example, I wanted to, file my tax return this year. Well, then I need to block 4 hours to work on my tax return. What happens is we don't put those things on our calendar. We do them anyway, and then we miss things we didn't want to miss. So the secret for me has been to be incredibly religious about my calendar. And I have to be totally honest, that's not me. So I have an assistant who's incredibly religious on my calendar on my behalf. And funny that what happened today is my fault because, Katie lives in Tennessee. And last night I booked this early morning appointment at 8:00 our time. I didn't want to bother her at 10:00 her time to add this to my calendar. But my calendar started off on the wrong foot because that meeting wasn't there. I knew that meeting was happening. It was informal. It was set up last night. And it created this problem. So when you create things from a reactive state, when you make last minute spur of the moment decisions, that's when things go wrong. If I would have thought about it yesterday and I would have looked at my calendar and I would have emailed Katie, she would have said, hey, listen, you got the 10:00 leadership. So she would have said 9:30 won't work for you, Gino. Can you do another time? So that's where the discipline comes in. That's where the discipline. So my lack of follow through today with you guys was a lack of discipline. And we have to acknowledge that that's really what it was. Because I have a system in place to prevent this, but I didn't use the system.
Yeah. I also, Jimmy, what you said around like not good at wrapping it up on time, right? And I think salespeople in general, partially because you're trying to be organic with a conversation. And it's not a like, hey, we have a meeting with an agenda. We need to get through these things. And then when we're done, we'll wrap it up, right? It makes it a little bit more challenging. And so I think it's helpful to, again, habitual, right? It's a discipline. You've got to learn the habit of, making sure you pay attention to when does that 5-10 minute mark hit. So I can start to insert some key language that lets that person know they're important, they matter, what we're talking about matters, but also it's time to go. And I think there are creative things that you can come up with to say, like, I really love where this conversation is going, or we still clearly have a lot we need to connect on. Let's, I'm watching the clock. I want to respect your time. I want to respect that you probably have other things going on today that matter. Let's find time on the calendar to continue this, or let's find time on the calendar to keep going through, the paperwork that we need, or whatever it might be. And then I think you just get into that habit and you create that discipline. And now you're at a place where, okay, it's second nature. Right. And you know how to manage the time on the clock when you're having that organic conversation and you're not, completely feet kicked up on the table and, leaned back and not really watching the clock. So there are some tips and tricks you can use like that too.
Now, Tasha, on that note, because I think all of that is great, I would just add one thing.
Yeah.
Which is you can also set the expectation in the beginning. Hey, Joe and Susie, I wanted to let you know, I'm so happy that we're on this call today, but I do have a hard stop at 11 a.m. Yeah. And so if we're not done with our conversation by then, well, don't worry about it. We'll just schedule more time either later today or tomorrow to continue our conversation.
Love that.
Unfortunately, I have a prior engagement, but let's get started right now and see how far we get.
Yeah.
So you could start the conversation with something like that, and that sets the stage so that when you do get to that last 5 minutes, they already know. They're not feeling cut off. They already know they're going to get cut off. And then you intercept with those qualifying things at the end, saying, hey, it looks like we have more to talk about. As we expected, 1 hour, we can't solve all the world's problems. So let's set another time. I'm going to have Katie reach out to you. And by the way, if you don't have a Katie, get a Calendly. We could have a whole one of these, by the way, on do's and don'ts on Calendly. Like that's a whole different animal. But if you don't have a Katie, use a Calendly. Have something that gives people access to your times to reduce their frustration of not being able to get a hold of you.
So I think it comes down to the balance between relational and transactional. And I think that I tell this to people a lot. You can quote me on this. I could afford to be more transactional. I tend to want to be more friends and relational. And let's go out. Let's have a drink. Let's, hang out. And there's no end time. But we could be friends and we could have a good relationship. But if we're in business and there's no transactional piece to it, in a lot of senses, you could argue that we're wasting our time. And if it's transactional, well, there is a time limit. We are dialed in on time. My time is worth X amount of money. And if we're only in relational mode and we're lacking transactional mode, well, then we're missing dollars. We're missing the results that I think that we're ultimately looking for. And I think we can all afford to be more transactional, but it comes down with the discipline of doing what you're saying that you're going to do, because you said it exactly right. Your conversion ratio is your trust score. Do I trust that this person is going to end on time? Do I trust that they will show up on time? And if you have that, hey, I know that I can transact with this person, not just be friends.
Imagine if I told you we close on time 100% of the time, and then I miss my meeting with you.
Right.
How are they supposed to trust anything that comes out of my mouth?
Your trust is zero. It's just straight down.
Yeah. So
I think I have it.
I want Sasha, because you're wonderful at this and I'm so terrible at this. Let's write down what Jimmy was talking about, transactional versus relational, because I'd love to do a whole series on that, a whole 20-minute interview on that, because there's a lot of gold in there to understand why some of the things we do are, I'm not going to say ineffective, but I am going to say inefficient. And we could talk about that a whole nother time, but let's get back to today, which is communications breakdown. We talked about communications breakdown with clients, with realtors, and things of that nature. But let's talk a little bit about the communication breakdowns that happen between managers and loan officers. How about that?
Great idea.
All right. So, Jimmy, you've been a loan officer for a long time. I've been in management since I was 13 years old. Really weird story, but I was in construction with my dad, and my dad brought me into the family business. And so the owner's son right, at 13 years old is the boss. And I had, my dad at the time had 50 to 100 employees. There's a lot of people running around that shop. And here I am, the hotshot kid coming in telling these guys, do this, to stop doing that. No, you didn't do it right. Fix this. Yeah, I've been managing people since I was 13 years old. And it's hard. It's really hard because when you say communications breakdown, it's really a lack of empathy. If you're communicating poorly with your staff, it's because you don't understand where they're at. And so for me as a manager, what I'm trying to focus on is, where is this person at and how can I help them get out of it if it's a rut and something that's totally undervalued, or stay on it if they have momentum. Because that's another piece that we have to do as leaders, is when they're doing well, fuel that, because you can't always be on a streak. I think of salespeople as professional athletes, and you're going to have wins and losses. You're going to have strikeouts and different at bats, and so it's a lot like that. And so we just need to make sure that when someone's on a streak, that we fuel it and keep that streak going as long as possible. And when someone's in the hole, tell them it's okay, but we'll get past it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a lot like parenting too. I mean, if your kids are doing something bad, you have to correct it. But if they're doing something right, I would argue it's more important to encourage that. Like I was on a call and I was babysitting my kids, not babysitting, they're your kids. I'm parenting. It's not babysitting when they're your kids. But I was working.
Duty.
Well, whatever. I'm on dad duty, and I called a lead to basically set up an appointment, and they were yelling at their kids, like saying, I'm on the phone. Would you just please shut up? And they're just going at it with the kids. And he pocket dialed, and I listened to the whole thing. And then I eventually hung up, and I'm like, and my kids were being so good. And I was like, hey guys, you're being really good boys and girls right now. I just want to call you out and let you know. I think that that's just as important, but the communication really is you're setting the tone for a vision of what is to be expected and what you actually do want to happen here. And if you don't communicate, if you don't say what your vision is, say what it is that I want you to do. Hey, you need to call this many calls per day, that you need to have this many meetings per week. But if you don't say that and you don't set that expectation, they're targetless and they can't go anywhere. And I think it's just a matter of even trying. Well, right.
Are you guys acknowledging people for more than just wins though? Because I think sometimes we get really caught up in acknowledging people when they close the loan or when they get a deal or whatever it might be. But are we acknowledging when we see the effort, even though it might not be the results that we want? Right?
Yes and no, Sasha. Yes and no, because I'm very sensitive to this participation trophy shit.
I don't like it either. But if you've got people that are grinding it out and you know it, and they just got handed some crap sandwiches that week, we've got to be like,
you went
hey,
to 8 open houses and got no deals, I'm still going to give you a high five, because you have to celebrate the activities.
Yes.
The goal shouldn't be the closed loan. The goal should be the 8 open houses and 44 phone calls.
Absolutely.
Because the closed loans will come if you do the activities. So celebrate positive activities. Yes. Celebrate people that aren't doing enough. No.
Absolutely. And I'm with you 100%. And I'm sure we're probably touching the PC button with the participation trophy. But yeah, I know you don't just get to show up and be a steady Eddie and get an attaboy or attagirl on the back.
And I'm going to use the Olympics, and I'm going to use soccer. When you grow up as a child in Argentina playing soccer, anything that's not a world championship is catastrophic failure. Anything. So 2nd, 3rd, 8th, 22nd, all of them result in tears and disappointment. That's how it is. And so what do you think helps the Argentinian team be as good as they are? It's the level of importance that they give this one thing, and that nothing but the ultimate pinnacle of success is acceptable. And look, this is a gray area in professional athletes as well, because I don't want to take anything away from a silver or a bronze medal. But we all know those people went home disappointed. Yeah. They're happy, kind of. They're like, well, that's pretty good. Silver was pretty good. And they'll justify it to themselves. But nobody wakes up in the morning as a professional athlete and says, I can't wait to be a bronze medalist. Nobody
That's
does
true.
that.
It's true.
Loan officers too. Nobody wakes up and says, "Hey, I really want to just close one loan this month. That's it. I'm done after one." Because we don't. Like here. I think this is common everywhere right now. You have 50 pre-approvals, but nothing's closing. Like, congratulations, you have a great 50 participation trophies right there. And they're just sitting there waiting for you. But that's just the thing. We do not get paid for participation in our field. It's not even it's black and white. We need to be transactional. We need to close these people. And if we don't, we're not going to survive. We're not going to make it. We need to make money.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to something you talked about. Maybe I think it was 3 or 4 episodes ago. Is we really, and I'll say we, including myself, I feel like one-on-many coaching isn't working right now. I think it really has to be one-on-one. If you really want to make an impact, so this is getting into communication, right? If you want to make an impact, there's no better way than one-on-one.
Yeah.
And there's no better way than in person. So, and if you want to level that up, even one more thing, share food, right? If you're sharing food one-on-one with somebody, that's telling them you're important to me.
You care.
You're important to me. How can I help you?
Yeah.
Right. And so then you set proper goals and expectations, and then you have deliverables for both of you. And then that way that reduces the amount of communications breakdowns, because the communications breakdowns come from narratives that are happening in our head, even though they may not be true.
Yeah.
Like Sasha mentioned, right? All this trauma came back from junior high. Like, how do we know what trauma people are going to have in their lives, right? So all these fears come out when things go wrong. So setting proper expectations eliminates communication breakdowns, and being able to measure it and spending time within each individual to show them you care. Those are some things that I would say are instrumental in trying to avoid communication breakdowns. And then I'm going to tee you up with this, Sasha, and then I'll tell you, like, they will happen.
I know.
So then what happens is how you handle them becomes important. I'm going to say this piece, and Sasha, then I want your 2 cents on this. But I was taught to never say, I'm sorry I was late. You say, thank you for being patient with me. That small change has a big difference in the way people react, because we've all heard the empty I'm sorry's our whole lives. Doesn't mean anything. But thank you for being patient with me. Do you think that's a better approach, Sasha?
I do, particularly because I was going to say it earlier, my dad, God rest his soul, like, he hammered in my head, don't ever apologize if you're going to do it again. And the bottom line is, to your point, we can't avoid this. It will happen. We can get better at it. We can close that margin of error of how often it happens, but the guaranteeing that it's not going to happen again, that's just not feasible. And so when you know that's the case, saying you're sorry, and then you know you're going to do it again, boom, back in that integrity swirl, right? So that, I love that framing of that language of thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for understanding. That helps create that bridge, that empathy. And it is still an apology. It's owning it. And I think it's taking accountability and responsibility for it, but in a way that says, I'm going to rebuild trust without taking it away so quickly again, because chances are it will happen again. So I love that.
Wow. Okay, so that was a fire quote. So here, to wrap this up, we're past 20 minutes. Set expectations. You got to set them. You got to do what you say. Spend one-on-one time with people. They got to have that coaching. That's where you set the expectations. That's where you can actually make an impact with someone. And Sasha, this is like the quote of the show is, don't apologize if it's going to happen again. That's hot. That's just, man, don't apologize if it's going to happen again.
That's going to reside with me a little bit.
Me too. Like, that was good.
My dad hammered it in my head. I mean,
what's your dad's name?
Chip. And he was a contractor, general contractor, focused on kitchen and bathroom remodel. Like, he was in the housing industry on the builder side. And for him, it was like his word was his value. And when he gave it, he meant it. And it meant he wasn't going back on it. So if he couldn't, then he would not set the expectation. He would make sure he used the right wording, like you just did, to frame it in a way of, I'm here, I care, I'm going to do everything I can, but I'm not going to tell you I'm going to do something if I know I can't guarantee it.
man, guys, there's nothing much more to say than that. I think we can leave it on that note and say,
Absolutely.
Well
So
done.
I want to thank everybody for joining us today. This is Next Gen Leadership. This is for leaders, people that aspire to be leaders, and people that just want to get better. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Sasha. Thank you, Gina. And we will see you
Gina?
next time.
Who's
Did I say
Gina?
Gina?
Dang
They're
That's
called
brutal.
worse.
That's brutal. That's brutal. Gino. Thank you, Gino. All right, we'll see you guys next time.
See ya.